happen. So I'm delighted that you're on. So thank you very much for joining me.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
And as we have sort of communicated across emails and all sorts of things, how was Tunisia? What was happening on that recent adventure?
Okay, Tunisia Desert Challenge, an extreme rally moto 8-day endurance race through the Tunisian desert, sand dunes a lot, and it was absolutely brutal. Nearly killed me, quite literally. Hardest thing I've ever done. Just hot, sweaty, digging really, really deep and digging in the sand, but also the most incredibly satisfying, brutal experience I've ever had. I loved, maybe not every moment of it, but I loved every moment of it. It was absolutely incredible. And the best thing is I finished, I just kept going. And I came 35 or 55 motorcycles and won the women's as the first woman to ever enter and the first woman to ever finish the rally. So I'm pretty proud.
Wow. And is that an event that's been on the hit list for a while, or the bucket list, you would say? Has it been one you've wanted to tick off?
I wouldn't say it's one I've been wanting to do for a really long time, because I've been doing this sort of riding for a really long time. So it's just been like the evolution of my riding journey. I did Red Bull Romaniacs last year, which was a brutal hard enduro race, and I was then getting my teeth into rally, and this seemed like a rather suicidal, ridiculous mission to go on. I knew it was going to be the hardest thing I've ever done, and it lived up to it.
and tell me, what was it? The mental side of things, physical fatigue, the body aching? What was it, or was it everything together just made it brutal?
Absolutely everything together. So that longest day was 400 and something K, 450K plus. So you're in the saddle for a really long time. The actual riding terrain was pretty challenging. The sand in Tunisia can be incredibly soft, and on a motorcycle with two wheels, balance, getting stuck, that was really hard. So physically, long time on the bike, technical, quite challenging terrain, particularly for the time on the bike. And with that, you have the heat, 45 degrees in the dunes some of the days, the hydration, the exhaustion, the fact that you're actually navigating from a paper scroll on your handlebars at the same time. There's no GPS or anything like that. I don't think I've ever been as physically and mentally overwhelmed and engaged and fully in anything I've ever done in my life to rally riding.
And throw that together with, you said you're the first woman to enter and the first woman to complete. What's that like in the mindset? I mean, you must be quite used to competing against men in that sort of environment, but that's a whole different mindset compared to just turning up on the start line. You know that you've got a massive challenge on your hands here regardless.
Yeah, motorcycling tends to be naturally, particularly when you go into the hard enduro and the rally area. So I'm kind of used to that. I don't think I realized no female had ever entered on a motorcycle before. There were female pilots in buggies and cars and navigators. What did it feel like? I actually think it added pressure on me, because being there in the bivouac, once people started realizing, like, there's rumors of people are looking around, they're like, oh my goodness, there's a girl that's on a motorcycle, and are you the girl that's riding the motorcycle? You're crazy. And you realize that a lot of people are watching you. And I'm not saying that people were watching me with the expectation that, oh, she's going to fail, but it was like, whoa, there's a girl doing this. That's insane. How's she going to do? And people were supportive. And I got a lot of energy from their support of just like pure, you're insane.
Yeah, I'll bet. And with, I mean, that's great to hear that you got support. Has it always been like that when you sort of come into is it a male-dominated sport, or even that race being male-dominated? Have you always been supported, or have you had a bit of negative from it? How's it sort of been along the way?
I'd say by and large, overall, it's incredibly supportive. You do definitely get some male egos which, have to wheelie past you or like face and overtake you, even if they then fall off, just because they need to show that they're, the big strong male and there's a ponytail out there. You do get an element of that. Thankfully, not too many of them. Most of the people out there are incredibly supportive and want to help. And if they see you fall off, they just act like you're another rider. Like, do you need help? Do you not? So it's a really nice environment, I would say. I do find that I get judged by my cover, if you want to take the classic judge a book by its cover phase, because I am a small blonde girl with naturally very long eyelashes. And people do look at me and go, well, she obviously can't ride. She's just trying to pose next to a bike and like look sexy. And it's like, I'm covered in mud, mate. I'm not trying to look sexy. I'm just out here trying to survive too. And I actually somehow get a little bit of energy from the fact that people look at me, judge me, and then I'm on a mission to try and get better at riding. I've got so much more riding skill to learn, but I really am getting better at riding, and that's satisfying.
Do you take motivation if some idiot goes past you doing a wheelie, thinking, "I'll show her"? Do you think I'm going to catch him? I mean, does it fire you up, or do you just put that out of your mind and get on with your own race?
Tortoise and the hare, I would say. It doesn't fire me up to try and chase them or anything like that, because I very much want to ride my own race, and by trying to chase them, it's probably going to make me ride faster than I should, and then I'll probably have an off. But what it does do is make me giggle in my head and think about how small a certain part of his body probably is.
Well said, well said. So obviously the girl on the bike, your world now, your Instagram profile, the way your profile's grown, everything, the relationship you've got with Vango, and now we're on this podcast and all these sorts of things. Can you take us back to the day that did change your life, the day that sort of put you on the path that you're on now? And yeah, take us back to what happened that day and how your world was turned upside down.
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably worth quickly mentioning that life prior to that day in 2014 was very adrenaline, extreme sports focused. I was incredibly fit. I did have a full-time office job, but every second I wasn't in the office, it was about sports. Kite surfing was my main one. I rock climbed, mountain bike, snowboard, snow kited, holidays, evenings, gym in my lunch breaks, cycling to work. Everything was sports and fitness, and I was incredibly fit. And if I could go back in time, I'd certainly take a moment, appreciate my body a little bit more for how capable it was. And it didn't hurt, because now I live and manage ongoing pain on a daily basis as a result of what happened. So what happened? It was a totally normal Tuesday. I'd been in the office all day, and I was actually heading to the wakeboarding lake after my husband and some friends for a night on water. I got on my bicycle. I wasn't an active motorcycle rider before the accident, which a lot of people don't realize. Motorcycles is something I've kind of discovered through my recovery and my journey. And so I started cycling, got about a mile down the road on the way to the lake, and a car coming the other way decided not to stop at their red light, and they cut straight across in front of me, leaving me with nowhere to go. And like that, I knew it changed. Now, I was not a bleeding mess. I wasn't like scraped up by paramedics or anything horrific like that. I went to hospital in an ambulance, and I was discharged later that night with bruising. Now, if we fast forward 8 years, which are now, but if we actually go forward 7 years, because that was like the bulk of my recovery, I would say in those 7 years I had 7 surgeries, including a reconstructed right shoulder and right hip. So when you think about the repercussions of being diagnosed with bruising versus the actual implication on my body, it kind of gives you a bit of an idea of the battle that it's been trying to get myself and my body back to fitness. Now, I've always had the goal of trying to get back to being pain-free. I've unfortunately had to realize that pain-free isn't feasible for my body, but instead get to a point where I can manage that and cope with the body that I have and still get out there and do fun, crazy stuff, basically. And sort of motorcycles have been a massive part of that kind of recovery journey, which has been very much mental and physical. I would say that despite 2 reconstructed body parts, the mental health recovery has been harder.
So when you got sent home with bruises and nothing was obviously, I know you'll have gone through this, and I hope it isn't too hard to talk about over and over again, because I know you've done it lots of times, but obviously diagnosis or things were missed. Is that right? From X-rays and things like that. If you've had to go on and get reconstructions and your body's still in agony today, things were missed in that initial visit to the hospital.
Yeah, unfortunately so. I think the reality is that medical teams are all humans like the rest of us. You know, they've got extensive training and careers to get them into the roles they're in, but at the end of the day, they are humans. And if you don't quite do the right scan from the right angle or the right test altogether, things can get missed. And unfortunately, that was a case for me. So for example, my big second surgery on my shoulder was 13 months after the accident. I should have realistically had that surgery the week of the accident. And so the actual recovery from that would have been much easier, because the body is an incredible thing. It adapts and copes, and muscles change and things compensate. So when I then had that surgery 13 months later, my body had spent a year and working with an arm that was an inch longer and a shoulder that could move around. And so not only did I have to rehabilitate from the surgery and the repairs that were done, I had to retrain my body back into balance again.
What was getting getting discharged that night? What was it? Could you walk? What was the next day like? The next morning, waking up?
No, I was really shaken up, obviously, but I really wasn't a bleeding mess or anything like that. You know, I had bruising, I was a bit swollen, and it made sense. You know, I was hurting because I'd been hit and I was bruised. I was pretty optimistic because I'd been told that, you know, a couple of weeks, you know, take a few days off work and you'll be fine. It was only when the swelling and the bruising started to go down and the pain change that it was starting to be like, hang on. And there's also a huge element of the squeaky wheel gets fixed first. So I was pretty immobile as a result of my shoulder, which was really horrific at the start. And so that immobility meant that my hip, which was bad, wasn't really as surfacely obvious because I wasn't really moving about. It wasn't till my shoulder got fixed and I started to be like, right, I can actually do something now, that my hip was like, no, you can't. Your hip's really bad too. And there's also the element of you couldn't have surgery on, well, I don't think it'd be fair to put surgery on both of those at the same time anyway. I don't know how you'd cope with that. Yeah. So there's an element of, for mental health, I'm almost a little bit grateful that I didn't know straight away. Back into surgery the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time, each time that was going to be the last surgery. You know, if you told me right at the beginning when I had my first surgery that you've got another 6 years of this, it would have been really bad. But it was a gradual, really frustrating 5 steps forwards, 4 steps back, 5 steps forwards, 7 steps back kind of process.
What were you?
And every time you go back into surgery, it doesn't get easier.
No, what were you like before the accident? You obviously fit as a fiddle, out all the time. Were you good with injuries then? Were you good at rehabbing, taking the time when you had a bang or a knock or a strain? Were you good, or were you always the kind of person that would rush and get back on the water as soon as you could?
I'd say I was pretty good, and injuries weren't all that frequent. I was very fit and strong, and in some ways the fact that I was so fit and strong will probably, this is me sort of, you know, your brain goes through everything over and over, probably didn't help the diagnosis process, because my body was so fit and strong, it just immediately engaged and adapted and almost covered things up. Whereas maybe if I hadn't had that strength, my body would have just gone like,
given up.
Yeah, I don't know. It's very easy to go back over and over these things and try and work out differently. I definitely know that if I was to go back in time and be stood in front of some of those consultants and surgeons again, I would have more confidence now to be like, no, I'm hurting. I'm not just a weak little girl that needs to just do her physio. Something is not right.
Yeah, no, difficult. And you mentioned the mental side of things. Is that been obviously how hard that can be? How have you dealt with that, and how dark has it got?
Darkest days that I didn't even realize the world could go so dark. Honestly, I was diagnosed with multiple mental health disorders. For example, change disorder, fear of the road. So change disorder for me manifested in me not seeing myself as me. Vanessa was this strong, fit, capable person. Broken, pathetic, painful mess that I was in, couldn't do anything, like it wasn't me. And I talk about myself in the third person, which was very confusing for other people because they were like, wait, what? Who's Vanessa? I thought you were Vanessa. Fear of the road is kind of exactly what it says on the tin. I was actively avoid any scenario where I was anywhere near it. And when you think about being hit on the road, if you break it down, I'd effectively lost trust in the highway code. You know, there's certain behaviors that when you go out on the road, you expect to happen. And when that's broken, everything is out to kill you, basically. I had awful night terrors, probably for a good 5 years after the accident, some of them being 3, 4, 5 times a night, waking up, screaming in sweats from my poor husband, having to make me realize that I'm actually just totally safe in my bedroom with my husband lying next to me and that I'm fine. And I got to a point where I realized that I wasn't okay. I was really proud of myself for asking for help and for getting help. And I think for anyone battling any kind of struggles in life, mental or physical, having the strength to ask for help is a sign of strength. It is not a sign of weakness. And yeah, so I got help. It certainly didn't happen overnight though. It took a lot of talking, a lot of pain, a lot of processing, but eventually I got to the point where I accepted my situation. And I think that acceptance of the situation is so key, because without acceptance, you cannot do what you need to do to move forwards and out of a situation. And holding on to all of this stuff, like the anger at the driver, me being angry at the driver, pity, upset, hate, all of those horrible things inside me did nothing but make a massive, horrible, painful knot of horrible emotion inside me. It didn't change my situation. It didn't change my pain. It didn't change my outlook. It didn't change my future. I had to release it and let go of it and move forwards and just accept, you know, it was an accident. It happened. It's not like she woke up in the morning and went, right, what time's Vanessa going to be there? It was an accident. And accepting that got rid of so much emotional pain that actually turns physical. A lot of emotions do, you know, that knot you get.
Identify each, or did it take the help to identify each? Because you've mentioned a few things there, from the fear of the road to the night terrors, to break them down individually, or was it a kind of, we need to address these all at once, and if we can do that, they'll all filter away? Or how did you attack it?
I mean, I was also diagnosed with depression, for example, and I think one of the main things that I focused on was realizing that all of these things were a result of what I was going through. You know, I still look back and I say, no, I wasn't depressed. I was feeling pretty horrific because of the pain that I was going through and the situation that I was in. And I knew that if I could change that situation and get stronger, get better, do the physio, go to the pool and walk 6 days a week for 3 months after every single one of the 5 hip surgeries, my situation would change and that would lift. There were more specific things that I did towards things like the change disorder or the fear of the road or coping with pain. And mindfulness has been a massive part of that. That's something I kind of learned about in my therapy, but then did a lot of self-research online and finding exercises. And I think a lot of people hear like mindfulness and they think, oh, you're sitting on the floor humming with your legs crossed, and I can't do mindfulness. It sounds all like floaty and theoretical. And I really urge you to realize that mindfulness is just a really big category for a whole load of different techniques. And the most important part for me in that was realizing how much control we do have as an individual over our thoughts, both our conscious thoughts primarily, but they then link to our subconscious thoughts, and our emotions linked to our thoughts. So I'll try and give you an example of where mindfulness has really helped me. Maybe I'll do two examples, one for pain and one for fear. And so for pain, which I have ongoing with my hip, I've learned to identify my trigger thoughts. Now, my trigger thoughts are what I've called, there's no scientific terminology, and this is kind of how I've learned to describe how I cope with things. So my trigger thought is that first thought I get in my mind where I go, my hip really hurts. And if I can pluck that thought right there when I first get it and go, get out, that's option one. Option two is to go, yeah, my hip really hurts. This sucks, doesn't it? Like, this isn't fair. Why does my hip have to hurt? Why does it always have to hurt? Like, this is rubbish. Why did it have to happen? Why me? Upset, blah, blah, blah. And you go down and down and down and spiral until the point that you get upset because you're hurting so much and you're feeling sorry for yourself and you're getting angry. And then your husband's upset because you're upset. And then the reality is, at the end of it, you're in the exact same body with the exact same pain, but now you're upset. Whereas if you can recognize that initial trigger thought, of the pain, and go, no, we're not even going to go there, Vanessa. Let's focus on something else. Let's take a painkiller. Let's sit down and take a rest. Let's do some physio, whatever it might be. But let's think about something else. Let's put some music on. Let's listen to the birds outside. Let's call a friend, have a chat, and get rid of that thought immediately. It saves you this downward spiral of the mind going crazy and then the emotions that directly link to it. And that's a coping mechanism I do very, very regularly for my hip pain.
So you almost instantly just flick into that when you feel the pain coming on. You've trained yourself to deal with that in that regard.
Yeah, and I will be honest, I'm not always able to do it. There are definitely moments, I'm a human, where it just gets to me and it will overwhelm me and I'll get upset. That's okay too. But the majority of the time now, over time, it's got easier and easier. I'm far better at recognizing those and just going, no, we're not even going to go there.
How can I ask? Obviously, we'll jump to motorbikes and cover things like that. But that must be a question you're asked a lot. And I'm sorry if I'm repeating it, but when I think of hips and I think of motorbike, I'm thinking there's going to be a lot of vibration or movement. How did you find your way to the motorbike world and into that sport after the accident that you were on, that you had?
I'll try and summarize it really quickly, but it initially started as a practical thing. So my recovery has been a roller coaster, up and down, bed bound, a lot of pain, immobile, getting stronger, getting fitter, coming up the roller coaster, getting to a point where I'm a little bit more active, more able, and that's the high roller coaster, realizing that I've got more pain than I should have, there's complications, blah, blah, more surgery, back down the roller coaster. And it's kind of worked out a surgery every year for 7 years. Now, at the higher points of the roller coaster, I was able to ride a motorcycle. Lower points, months and months, years of those 7 years, I wasn't able to ride a motorcycle. And at one of the higher points, after the accident, I was really struggling with getting to work in central Oxford. Traffic, parking, fuel costs, time sat in the car hurts my hip. And so I thought I should get a motorbike. Not thinking the road or any of that stuff. Vanessa's brain doesn't always join dots up, but I thought this is a genius idea at the moment. I've got a very supportive husband, so we got me a motorbike. Getting on it and riding it was a big challenge, and the mindfulness definitely helped me with that, of actually breaking down the mind's ability to overthink everything and build all these fears and actually try and rationalize it. You know, like, Vanessa, you're not going to die, you've not even left the driveway.
Yeah.
And so the next step in that was actually a wedding anniversary where my husband and I got to Harley Davids for an afternoon. We missed our wedding anniversary because he's in the Air Force and was in Afghanistan. So we took these two bikes out. And at that point in life, I didn't really see the point of much, because all my friendship circles my hobbies, my lifestyle, everything was gone. You quickly realize who your real friends are. Come and sit by your bed and play board games on a Saturday and not go off and go kite surfing. And once I was back at work, I didn't really see the point of, why would I take time off? Like, what's a holiday when you don't do sports? I don't want to go on a spa break. And these Harleys for the afternoon for a little anniversary thing made me realize that I could have adrenaline, a bit of wind in the hair, and some adventure whilst not being physically able. Now, normally it's non-bikers that go, how would you ride a Harley Davidson if you've got a dodgy shoulder and a hip? And if you actually think about the shape and the style of a Harley Davidson, it's like a sofa with an engine. You're like laid back. I modified the pegs to have the most open hip position. Once you're on the bike, your foot goes on the peg, that foot doesn't need to move. And to this day, it hurts me less being on a motorbike than it does in a car. Because until you have a horrible joint, you don't realize how much work going between the pedals your hip has to do. And you don't steer like this. Off-road, totally different question. But on the road, you just sit there and potato along on Harley Davidson. And that was like the best decision for my mental health recovery. We did like 20,000 miles over the following few years, like 15 countries around Europe. And it became like our new
lease of life.
hobby. Yeah, exactly. New lease of life. But the inner burn for adrenaline and the physical side of sports that I'd had prior to the accident never really went away. I always wanted that back, but I then discovered motorbikes and loved them. So it was like, well, maybe off-road would be a way to link the extreme sport and the motorcycle together. And I was actually bedbound after hip surgery in the morning, and I turned to my husband and I was just like, can I get a dirt bike? He was like, what? Look, what? Thankfully, he's incredibly supportive. And so we went out and got me a dirt bike, and it was 5 months until I could even sit on it. But it was there as a goal, as a reminder every day when I couldn't find the energy, when I hurt too much, when I just didn't want to do my physio. It was sat there as a reminder for like, come on, Vanessa.
Yeah.
We want to go for a ride.
You can do this. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's an incredible story. And with your life and the way it's unfolded, what was social media presence and sponsors and all that before the accident? How you've become the girl on a bike and the way the world is now around you. And when I look at the brands that you work with and the way your adventures go, obviously, was that on the horizon with the sports that you did prior, or what you have now, is that completely just through motorbiking and falling in love with riding bikes?
It's totally new. I was a team rider for a shop as a kite surfer before the accident, but I mean, it really wasn't anything. It was just the fact I love kite surfing and I was a female doing it, and I don't know, it wasn't really anything. I did have a 10-year career in marketing, communications, sort of reputation management, PR-y kind of stuff. So a lot of that is something that I've used since I've started my Instagram. But when I started my Instagram, I had no intention of or visualization that this could ever come about. It was more about trying to connect with other people that were going through hell in life, really. And what I never realized is that other people would get so much energy through my story, and then I'd get energy from the fact that they get energy, and then get energy, which is brilliant, right?
Yeah,
we can that little bit easier just through sharing stuff. Then that's a fantastic way to turn something that's been really horrific for me into somehow positive. And so yeah, I feel very, very blessed to be working with some incredible brands. I probably work more now than I've ever worked in my life, but I'm helping people. I'm helping myself by helping people because it helps me with energy. And yeah, I'm quite grateful for that.
Well, what you've inspired me, and I mean, you've been through so much, but now accomplished so much. And watching you across social media, and Vango have introduced me to your Instagram page, and obviously now we've had a chat, and it's something that it's not only, I think of my daughter who's 8, I don't know if she'll ever ride a motorbike or anything like that, but your story isn't just talking to people that ride motorbikes. It's talking to men, women, children, everybody, that the world can hit you really hard and you can get back up and keep pushing. And that's, listening to other stories, other podcasts that you've been on, reading articles, even just the way the team at Vango described you until I was introduced to your Instagram page. You are doing things that inspire many, so thanks for joining me on the show. Thanks for being part of the Vango team, because you're out there doing great things, and keep doing what you're doing, keep dominating.
Thank you. I really appreciate that energy. I will do my best to keep fighting on.
Yeah, awesome, Vanessa. Great to meet you. Hopefully we'll meet face to face one day, maybe at a Vango event or something like that. But thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dig over here this side. Just dig in there. Just do it. Well done, mate.